Stephen Faring, in your last Q&A show, you mentioned faith as the main ingredient to religions. That makes me wonder, could faith be a misunderstood ingredient in critical thinking? Because there are many things which, like souls or spirits, we cannot see, smell, hear, taste, etc., but which we absolutely count on and have faith in, such as magnetic lines of flux, such as gravity, such as love. You could name many things you can't touch which influence our lives, and I think faith is just one of many. What say you? Thanks for the question, Steve. And you're bringing up faith. So let's first take a look at what faith is, because you're comparing it to immaterial things like souls or spirits, but you're also comparing it to other things which you can't see, smell, or taste, and yet which you do experience, such as gravity or love. So are these all in the same bin? And no, they're not. And let me clarify. So faith is a primary component. It's not the only component, but it is a primary component of religion, because faith and religion, by definition, deal with supernatural forces or entities or experiences. Supernatural, above and beyond the natural, what we see, hear, sense, and experience. So by its very definition, it's moving into or going into realms of experience or understanding that are beyond our senses. This is kind of a really important concept, because gravity and love are not beyond our experience or our senses. The artifacts of faith or religion, the ideas of them, are things that we experience, but faith itself is really sort of a semi-emotion, semi-intellectual sort of process. It has been variously called different things. I'm going to go over a couple ideas on faith. To answer your question, though, of course, can faith be misunderstood in critical thinking? Absolutely, of course it can, and often is. I perceive this right now as best I can with, in terms of how it's misunderstood, when I see atheists or agnostics or non-believers argue with theists as though the theists have no reason at all to believe what they believe. In fact, that's just not true at all. But this is also open to straw manning and bad arguments, I probably on both sides, but let me give you an example. One definition of faith that's been forwarded by and used often in the atheist community, and I don't know where it came from exactly, I've only known R and Roz when I have heard propagate it more than anybody else, is the idea that faith is belief without evidence. Now, this has been strawmanned when it's been replied to by theists. For example, I looked up a video on this today where a guy made a whole hour-long video about how faith is not belief without evidence, because what he said is that this means that there is no reason for believers to believe in Christ. And that's not what faith is belief without evidence. That's not what that means. It doesn't mean that there is no reason. It means there's no evidentiary reason. And this is a big deal, because this is where the critical thinking enters in. There can be lots of reasons to believe in something without having any evidence for it, and yet you still have reasons. Are those reasons legit? Depends on your standard of belief, evidence, and ideas. And that's where the arguments start coming into play. I've sort of put together this idea that faith is those ideas which you don't have to think about anymore. Now, that's not a religious definition. You can have faith in all kinds of things, and many people do. We have faith in science in many, 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 many ways. We don't necessarily understand the science. We just understand that it works. And we believe that it works, and, for whatever reasons. And but we know, and this is where this analogy breaks down very, very quickly. So don't think that this is an absolute black and white, totally solid analogy I'm making here, because the faith that we have in our cell phone is a little bit different than the faith we have in God, right? But the idea that you don't have to think anymore about that means that you accept this thing as true. This works, right? I believe this works because science says it works. Do I know the science of telecommunications and, infrared or whatever waves these things go on, 5G. We'll get into that later. No, I don't. I don't know anything about it at all. So when you tell me that this works because of satellites, okay. I mean, I can understand the explanation for it, but I'm pretty much taking it on faith that you know what you're talking about. And I don't think about it too much anymore. I just know it works. So in a way, you could say I have faith in a phone, or in your explanation of how a phone works, the scientific explanation for it, I guess you could say, right? When it comes to religion, of course, and let's get back to this thing with evidence, belief doesn't have to be based on anything other than a feeling. Makes you feel good, makes me happy, or makes me sad, or whatever. I mean, whatever emotion your faith or belief is based on, that could be the sum total of the reason why you believe a thing, and that's okay. But when you're challenged on it, confess that that's the reason instead of trying to go into these long-winded explanations of intelligent design and let's bring science into it. This was one of the biggest mistakes I think was made in this big huge argument between faith and science that I guess started in the Enlightenment. Faith doesn't surrender itself to science or to evidence, because it's not based on science or evidence. It's based on what makes people feel good or feel right, quote unquote, what they feel is correct. But you can't point to a feeling with somebody else and say, see, there it is. There's the feeling, right? And this is where we get the differences. We're going to come back around now to this thing like with gravity. No matter how many hours I sit here, this is going to keep doing this. It's a predictable experiential phenomena. There's a piece of evidence here. I let this go, it drops at the same rate of fall, at least it's according to my naked eye, every single time. And we do it enough times, and enough people do it enough times. Not just me. I watch other people do it. Other people report that they did it, right? Get the same results. Okay. Now we've got a reflection of what we understand to be reality in the physical world, which we can repeat, which we can understand as repeatable, even if we don't know what's causing this pin to fall. We're going to assign a label to it. We're going to call it gravity. We don't know what it is, but we can observe that it happens over and over and over and over, so many times, in fact, that there haven't been any exceptions we can find. Under these circumstances, this behavior repeats 100% of the time that we try it. That's evidence-based thinking for a knowledge of a thing that exists called gravity. What that is, how it works, what are the exceptions to it, how strong is it, what causes it. All those questions are then developed using more and more and more experimentation and peer review. People have to not just carry out experiments, but other people have to carry out those same experiments and get the same results before we validate that this is a true claim, that we grant it the label now of truth, of scientific truth. I'm way simplifying, but I'm just trying to get to a point here, which is that it's repeatable, it's observable in some fashion, and so therefore we agree that it exists and it has reality as we understand it. A feeling, a belief, an idea you have isn't repeatable in anybody else's head. Not to 100% certainty. We can't know. I can't know what you know or what you believe or what you think about a thing. That's very, very, very personal to you. So that's where belief comes in. That's where faith comes in. And that's why it's not repeatable. What's repeatable are the words. You can say the Lord's Prayer. I can say the Lord's Prayer. Well, now we've both said the Lord's Prayer. But did both of us does that mean we both have faith? Not at all. You know, and I both know that I could be lying. I could be ignorant of the words I'm saying. I could even speak a different language and I'm just mouthing words. There's no faith necessarily involved in that picture. It doesn't have to be a component of that. I don't get to say that with the pin dropping. It drops every single time. It's an observable thing. It's always that way, and the pin's not making any decisions about it one way or the other. So I don't have to consult the pin's understanding of gravity to know that gravity is a thing. I do have to consult you and your understanding in order to get what your faith is. So it's just something that exists in your head. It doesn't exist anywhere else in the world, not in the observable, testable, evidence-based world. Okay, lots more that could be said about this and has been said by many, many smarter people than me, but that is a response to your question, which I hope will provoke a little bit of thought, and I think answers your question.